Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do chapter 4, types of policies. Now, it's okay if you guys do not get this chapter on the first go. Most people don't. So if you need to keep redoing this chapter, keep doing it until you master it, okay? So the first thing we're going to go over is term life. So term life is temporary, it's pure protection, and there is no cash value. What does that mean? Your policies do not last a lifetime. They're only for a short amount of years. And then it is just life insurance, pure protection, just life insurance, and there's no cash value. So let's define cash value before we move on. Cash value is a savings attached to your life insurance, okay? So if it doesn't have that, it means that it's most likely a term policy, okay? So in your test, they have a tendency to do something like say the same thing but in different ways. Like instead of saying term life, they'll say a temporary policy, or a pure protection policy, or a policy that does not accumulate cash value. This is all ways to say the same thing. So make sure that you guys are aware of different synonyms and things for the same topics, because in your test, they might use one of those instead of saying term life. Now, going into the different types of term life, the first thing is level term. Level term is like a line, okay? It's from start to finish the same. So premium is the same and coverage is the same. So premium, your payments will stay the same throughout the policy, and same thing with your coverage. Annual renewable term, or they might say ART, which is the same thing. Annual renewable term means your policy will renew every year. And what happens every year to you? Every year you get a year older. So I think of annual renewable term like a staircase. You're going up. So it means that every year your premium actually goes up, because every year you get a year older. So therefore they charge you more because of your age, right? So every year it renews and it increases. Decreasing term. Decreasing term, I like to think of it like a downhill, right? So you start at the top, a lot of coverage, and slowly you're going down, so eventually you don't have any, right? So why would you need this, right? Why would you need your coverage to decrease? Most of the time when you see a decreasing term, you're going to be using it for mortgage or debt, or you're paying off something. Because in the beginning, when let's say you get a house, in the beginning, you owe a lot of money on the house. So you owe a lot of money on the house, you need a lot of coverage. But eventually, you're paying the house off. So if your payments are decreasing in the amount of what you owe, so is your coverage, right? So it's gonna equal the amount that you owe. So let's say you owed a $200,000 on a house and you paid $100,000 off, then now you owe $100,000. So your coverage isn't gonna stay up at $200,000. It's gonna go down to $100,000. And eventually when you pay off the house, then you owe zero on the house. So therefore your coverage is going to stop. It's going to be zero. You don't need it anymore. Decreasing term starts with a lot of coverage, ends with a little bit, okay? Increasing term. Increasing term is you start with a little bit, end with a lot. So where do you see this most of the time is like inflation, or we want the value of your coverage to stay the same. So like, let's say right now, I said, here's $100, go buy whatever, right? And you go buy whatever you want to buy with $100. And let's say in 10 years, I find you and I said, here's another $100. Go buy the same exact things you bought 10 years ago. You couldn't, right? Because everything gets more expensive over time. So if your coverage right now is 100,000, in 10, 20, 30 years, that 100,000 needs to go up if you want it to do the same thing, right? If you think 100,000 is going to cover this and this and this, then most likely it needs to increase in order to stay the same value, right? So that's why your coverage would increase over time. So both with the decreasing term and the increasing term, what we're looking at is the coverage. So either the coverage is decreasing or the coverage is increasing. So that's what we're talking about, not the premium, okay? The next one we're going to go over is renewable and convertible features. So renewable is your policy is coming to the end of its time and you want to start it over. So let's say you had a 20-year policy, your 20 years is coming to end and you want to renew it for another 20 years, right? So when you renew, you're renewing for the same amount of time that you had the policy for. So if you had a 5-year policy, you're renewing for another 5 years. If it's 10-year, another 10 years, 20 years, and so on, okay? Now, when you renew, your premium is going to go up. Now, they're not going to check your health. So what they say is, what they use is evidence of insurability. Okay? Evidence of insurability is basically showing that we're able to cover you because of your health and things. You're showing I'm still coverable. Well, when it comes to renewing your policy, you don't need to show that. So it says without evidence of insurability, so no health, no nothing. The reason your coverage stays the same but your premium goes up is because you are now older. So what they're doing is they're charging you at the age you're coming to. So they say the attained age. So let's say if it's January, right? And my birthday's in March, they're still going to charge me for the age that I'm going to turn in March, not the age that I am in January. So your attained age is either the age you're at or the age you're coming up to in that year, okay? Now, with convertible, I think of it like a car, right? Convertible car means that you're going from a car that has a top to one that doesn't, right? So same thing, you're going from a term life to a whole life. You're changing the type of policy that you have. And again, without evidence of insurability, so no health, no nothing, but they are going to charge you more because of your attained age. Okay, so those are the term life policies. So we're going to go ahead and go into whole life now. Now, whole life is permanent. It's something that's permanent. So unlike term was temporary, whole life is permanent and there is cash value and you're covered till age 100. Now, remember that just like term, they'll say things like, instead of saying whole life, they'll say permanent policy. Okay, so make sure you know the synonyms. Now going into the types of whole life. So again, it says see page 21. You want to look at the bottom right-hand corner for the page numbers. So these are the first types of whole life. There's more, but these are the types. Now, if you see, they all end at the same age, right? They all end at 100, right? Because whole life, the moment you say whole life, you know it's going to cover you till 100 years old. Now, why is there different whole lives then? Because we're going to look at when you're paying your whole life, it varies. So straight life, it means you're paying for your whole life policy for the whole time that you have it. So in my example, let's say you start at 20, from 20 to 100, you're paying for the policy the whole time. So that's 80 years of paying for your policy. Now, most people, if I said, oh, do you want to be at 99 years old paying for your policy? Most people say no, right? I don't want to bill at that age. I want to, just be relaxed if I'm still alive at that time, right? So most people would want to pay for their policy. They want to pay their policy off sooner than waiting till they reach 100, right? So the next two, they're the same, limited pay. Now the difference is how they work is limited pay. The first example is 20 pay. So the 20 represents an amount of years. So it could say 30 pay, 40 pay. That means 20 years to pay your policy, 30 years to pay your policy. So for this example, you'll be paying for your policy for 20 years, and after 20 years, you're done paying for your policy. So in my example, you start at the age of 20, you pay for 20 years, so by 40, you're done paying for your policy, but just know you're still covered till 100. You just don't have to pay any premiums for your policy. Limited pay to 65. Pay to 65, the 65 represents an age. So it can say pay to 70, pay to 75. So they're saying by the age of, an example here, it says by the age of 65, you'll be done paying for your policy. So again, you start the age 20, you go to 65, and by the time you reach 65, you're done paying for your policy, but you're still covered till 100. So make sure you read your questions and see, are they asking when does your coverage stop or when does your payment stop? Because if they ask you something like in a limited pay to 65, at what age does your coverage stop? Most people see the number 65 and they say 65. Right? But remember, the question asked, when does your coverage stop? And your coverage stops at 100. And the last one for these examples is a single premium. Single, right? One premium payment. So it means one payment. You pay one big payment right at the beginning and you're done paying for your policy. Say, going back up to the whole life page. So we just went over continuous, limited pay, and single premium. Now, if you see interest sensitive or current assumption, you want to look on your test for guaranteed or current interest rate. It's really the only thing that they're going to ask you when it comes to the interest sensitive whole life. Now, if you see index whole life or equity index whole life, what they're going to most likely ask you is what index do they base it off of? And they're going to base it off the S&P 500 or the expanded version, which is Standard and Poor 500. Now, what is the Standard and Poor? It is the top 500 companies in the stock exchange. So it's those top 500 companies, that's what they base it off of. So index whole life, S&P 500. Index, S&P 500. That's what you want to look for. Adjustable life. Now, adjustable life, right? What's a synonym for adjustable? Changeable, right? You can adjust them, you can fix it, you can, right? You can move it around. So I think of it kind of like if you were going to go wash your hands, right? If you go wash your hands and I said put the cold water, easy, flip the cold water knob on, right? If I said hot water, easy, flip the hot water on, right? But what if I told you you want warm water? Well, that's when you start what? Adjusting, changing, and then feeling the water until it's your correct temperature. So everyone has a different warm water because some people like a lot of hot in their warm water and some people want it more cold. Now, same thing, not every person is going to have the same policy. So you can adjust based on what you want. So you can adjust the face amount, which is your coverage, right? How much you're covered for, your premium, right? How much you're paying, and the type of plan that you have. Now, there are some things, obviously, that the policy owner can't control, right? The company is in charge of that. Now, the example is, let's say if I told you, you're going to give me $20. So you can give me $20. Let's say you decided, no, I'm going to give you $10, or no, I'm going to give you more than $20. So you get to decide how much money you give me, right? But can you control what I use that money on? No, right? So same thing, the client can control how much money they put into the policy. They can control how much money they give to that company. But what they can't control is where does that company put that money? So you cannot control the investment vehicle when it comes to adjustable life, right? So adjustable life, you cannot go ahead and put the money and say, put it in this account. Like, you can't do that. You can say, here's how much money, and then the company will decide where to put it. Going into the next page. So universal life. So before I go to the page 24, like it says, I'm going to go over the highlights. So it says the insurance component is always annual renewable term. Now, remember that, okay? The insurance component is always annual renewable term. Now, on the second one, it says interest sensitive cash value. So just like in school when they said 2 + 2 is 4, what I want you to look for is interest sensitive cash value and annual renewable term, if you put those two things together, they're always going to equal universal life. So annual renewable term, interest sensitive cash value, put together, universal life. So like 2 + 2 is 4, that plus that equals universal life every time, okay? Now with universal life, there is 2 death benefit options. So option A is a level death benefit. It means that your death benefit will stay the same, right? Option B is an increasing death benefit option, okay? So that means that your death benefit is going up. So option A, level, option B, increase. Now, if it says index universal life, then look for the S&P 500. So if you see the word index, look for S&P 500. Index, S&P 500, okay? So now I'm gonna go ahead and go to the page 24. Again, bottom right-hand corner, that's what you're looking for. So now we're here at this diagram. So we're gonna look at the stuff above the squiggly line, okay? Above the wiggly line, that's what we're looking at right now. So let's say this bucket represents your cash value. And we already said, what kind of cash value does universal life have? Interest sensitive cash value. Now going into your bucket is your premium, and your premium is $100. That $100 is not going to change. Then you have interest going into the bucket. What comes out of the bucket? Expense and the cost of insurance. Now what type of insurance component does universal life have? Annual renewable term. So remember when I went over annual renewable term, I said, think of a staircase. So here's our staircase, okay? And this is where we find out how much the cost of insurance is going to be. So let's say first year, and again, all the numbers on here are just examples. It's not actually numbers, it's just something to help you understand how it works, okay? First time, first year, you put in $100. We look in the staircase. How much is the cost of insurance? $50. So you put in 100 in the bucket. You're taking out 50 for the cost of insurance, and the other 50 stays in the bucket. So this is where that first $50 comes from. That first $50 comes from the $50 that was taken out and the $50 that stays in. The next year, again, annual renewable term increases every year. So the next year goes up to 75. You put in 100, take out 75. How much stays in the bucket? 25. So at this moment right now, you have $75 in your cash value. The next year, it goes up to 100. You put in 100, you take out 100. How much money stays in the bucket? Nothing, because you took it all out for the cost of insurance. Next year it goes up again. We're at 125. You're putting in 100. Now they're saying take out 125. Now you put in 100 and they're saying 125. Well, where do you think they're going to get that extra $25 from? From the bucket. They're going to take this $25 out to help pay for the life insurance. So the next year goes up to 150. You're still putting in 100. They're saying now pay us 150. How do you think they're going to get the extra 50 from? The bucket. So now at this point, you have $0 in your bucket, right? In the interest sensitive cash value. Why? Because we use 25 to pay for the cost of insurance, and we use the $50 to pay for the cost of insurance. But again, annual renewable term continues to go up. So now we're at 175. You're putting in 100, you got to take out 175. There's not enough money in the bucket to cover that. So what happened? When there's not enough money in the cash value to help you pay for the life insurance, your policy will lapse. Okay? Your policy will lapse. Now, staying on this page, we're going to go ahead and go over variable life. Now, if you see it says / annuity. Now, annuities are chapter 6. But the reason I go over them here, because with a variable life or variable annuity, this system works for both questions, whether it's asking about life or annuities. So if you see the question has the word variable in it. So let's say the question says, in a variable life insurance, what type of accounts do they have? Now, if you see any of the options has the word separate in it, okay? Any of the options has the word separate in it, that's your answer. So what type of accounts do variable life insurance have? Separate. And vice versa. If you see the question has a that says what type of annuities deals with separate assets? What type of annuities? Variable. So you see how I'll kind of switch? Now, a little thing to try to remember this is look for the S, okay? So S, the separate starts with an S, and they'll ask about regulators. The regulators starts with an S, okay? It's the SEC, also known as the Security Exchange Commission, or FINRA. And now again, just like in chapter 3, when I went over the 230 or 31, same thing here. It could either be SEC or FINRA. Now, what happens when you see both? If you see both as an option, you want to go for SEC because that's more right, okay? So that's the one you want to answer. So it's either SEC, and if SEC isn't an option, go with FINRA, okay? Licenses, last thing they'll ask you is they'll say, how many licenses do you need to obtain in order to transact a variable life insurance or variable annuity? Basically, that question, all it's saying is, how many licenses do you need to get to sell this? Dual license. So it means you have 2 licenses. First is your life license, the one you're studying for right now. And the second one, the S in SEC stands for security. So what license do you need? You need your securities. Now, what is a securities license? You know, it's not a security guard, guys. It's your investment license. We don't say investment license, we say securities license, okay? Now going back up. So we went over universal life. We went over variable life. Variable universal just combines the two. So now we're gonna go over specialized policies. Specialized policies. I'm gonna go over joint life and survivorship at the same time, because if you look at the first 2 bullet points for both of those, they're exactly the same. It says they cover 2 or more people. The age is based on the average age of everyone in the policy. Now the difference is that 3rd bullet point, very important. If you see the highlight, with joint life says first, and with survivorship it says last, and that's important. Let's say we had 100 people in a policy together. If it's a joint life, the money will be paid out the moment the first person passes away. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter when, but if one person passes away, the money gets paid out. Now with the survivorship life, it's the last person. So if it's 100 people, everyone dies. If there's still one person alive of that 100 people, that policy has not paid out any money till the last person passes away. Now, if you notice in parentheses underneath, it says second to die. Now, yes, it is true, because most of the time it's only 2 people in these types of policies, but sometimes they have more, so it's easier to remember last. Because if there's more than 2 people, it won't be the second person, it'd be the last person, okay? Jumping juvenile. If you see the word juvenile, your head, I want you guys to think of minor. Juvenile, minor. So jumping juvenile is a policy talking about a minor. So basically, if you have a minor, you on a policy and they're underage, what happens is when they become of age, a predetermined age, usually in policies it's around between the ages of 21 and 25. And what they do is they're going to increase the coverage of the policy when that person becomes that age. So if let's say they were 16 when they got it, and then once they turn 21, they go from, let's say, 10 grand in coverage to 20 grand in coverage. Okay. Now, if you see the second bullet point says the face amount increases, but what does it say at the end? The premium remains level. It means that the coverage in the policy increases, but the premium will stay the same. Those payments will not change. Okay. So in a jumping juvenile, what jumps, what increases is your coverage. Okay. Group life. So group life is something that you'll see a couple times in your book, but right here is a brief explanation of it. In chapter 7, we really go into group life and how it works. So I'm going to go over it very briefly here. And then in chapter 7, you can get more details. Okay. So group life is a policy written on more than one person, right? And the group must be a group for a reason other than to purchase insurance, right? It's not like we can be like, oh, let's all get in a group to get some life insurance. Like, no, we all work at the same facility. We all are teachers. We all do this. So that's why we can get a group life insurance together. A master contract goes to the sponsor, which is usually the employer. Okay, so the master contract, everyone's information, that's going to go to the employer. The certificate of insurance, that's what's going to go to each member, which is usually the employees. Okay, so basically it's a piece of paper that's given to everyone in the policy saying, hey, you're covered in this policy. Okay, now again, if you see the ones that aren't highlighted, they are important. It says coverage is based on non-discriminatory rules, rates and coverage. You're looked up as a group. The amount exceeds 50 grand is taxable. Okay, well, again, we'll go over that more in chapter 7. And each member, this is important, members must have the right to convert. Now, let's say if you decided not to work at that place anymore. Now, what happens to your policy? You know, if you stop working there, they're going to kick you out of the policy, but you do have time, if you wanted to take that policy and make it by yourself. So when you're in a group life, you're in a policy with a lot of people. If you left that facility, you can actually take that policy and make it just for yourself. Obviously, if you're going to start paying for that policy, it's going to be way more expensive because you went from paying with a group to paying by yourself. But you have the right to go ahead and make it an individual policy so that you can continue to have coverage even after you've left the group policy. Okay, credit life is the last thing for chapter 4. So credit life is when a debitor, right, somebody owes money to a creditor and the creditor gets a policy on that person. So let's say I'm a creditor and you owed me, let's say $5,000. What I can do is I can get a credit life on you for $5,000 or less, can be more than what you owe me. And basically, if you pass away before you pay your debt off to me, that life insurance policy will pay out and I will get that money that you owed me and you'll no longer be in debt. So your family doesn't have to pay for the debt when you passed away because that life insurance policy did it for you. Okay, it usually uses a decreasing term because if you remember, like I said, decreasing term, you use it for things like paying off a debt, things like that, right? Because in the beginning you owe a lot and eventually you're paying the debt off so it goes down, right? Now, if you see right here, it says the creditor is the owner and the beneficiary. So the creditor is the one that owns the policy and the creditor is the beneficiary. So that means the creditor is going to get the money. So does the debitor get any money out of this? No. But can the debitor pay for this policy? Yes. So if you wanted to get this policy and pay for it so that if you passed away, the creditor will get their money, then you can pay for it or the creditor can pay for it. But the person that in the end that's going to get the money is the creditor, not the debitor. And again, the policy cannot pay out more than you owe. So if you owe me, let's say now you owe me $3,000, you pass away, I'm not going to get $5,000. I'm going to get what you owed me, which was $3,000. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 4.